Hello. Hiya. How are you doing? Okay, this is my third instalment today, I think. I'm just taking it easy at home, as indeed probably most of you are. Best thing we can do, really. Stocked up with everything I need to get by for the time being. And going to use this time to document the ever-evolving series of Navatsuraku music albums. I wasn't planning on doing this. I was really planning on just doing individual song videos on a more scattergun approach. But I did one on Now 1, the first ever Now, and then that just led to 2, 3, 4, 5 and onwards. I'm thinking as we're getting to the end of the 80s, because we're now midway through 1989 and we've only got a couple more to go, probably take a little breather when we get to the end of the 80s, maybe do something else, do some other videos, and then we'll come back refreshed and we'll crack on into the 90s and hopefully we'll make it all the way to the present day. I think we're currently at Now 104. So here we're at Now 15, which I make about an eighth of the way through, roughly. So we've still got an awful lot to do, a lot of ground to cover. We kick things off for this volume, Now 15, with Queen back again at the beginning of a Now album. I think the last time they were number one, side one, was on Now 2 with Radio Gaga. This is Queen very much back in their kind of hard rock mode, and it sounds pretty good to me. Now, I believe Freddie knew he was ill at this point. I'm looking at video and he's still kind of giving it all. But I think historically now, if you look at the timeline, he was definitely falling ill during recording of this album. So this would go on to be their last ever full album recorded with him. That's The Miracle. And yeah, this is pretty good, strong, hard rocking, classic Queen opener, really. Could have been on any Now, between 1 and 15. And we follow this one up with Kick It In by Simple Minds. I've really not been... The funny thing about Simple Minds is I was raving about Don't You Forget About Me, like how great it was. But everything else they've done, I've been really rude about. Kick It In's no example, really. It's just kind of mediocre, sort of second-rate, sub-U2 kind of stuff. Number 3 is Good Thing by the Fine Young Cannibals. Again, they've changed their style even since their last single, and they've gone for a kind of Motown-y sound, a bit like the Blues Brothers. It works pretty well, actually, and it's nice that... let's get it on. It's nice that... what's his name? Roland Gift has got a good sort of soul-y song that he can get his vocals into. So, yeah, it's pretty derivative of that sound, but it's well executed. It's got energy and oomph. Here we go. I think this is way better than She Drives Me Crazy. Followed up with Americanos. Now, this was Holly Johnson, singer of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, who'd long since split up. He came back for a briefly successful career in 1989. Americanos is a pretty ham-fisted stab at American culture. It's pretty obvious. Doesn't leave a lot to the imagination. Musically, it's almost a pastiche of Hungry Heart by Bruce Springsteen. It's a bit snidey. I kind of feel like, well, why are you criticising? I mean, you know, Britain's got its own problems. It just seems a bit sort of snobby, almost, culturally snobby. But it's okay. Holly Johnson's quite an interesting character. And, you know, it's good that he was doing something different from just Frankie Goes to Hollywood. We follow that up with Baby I Don't Care by Transvision Vamp. This was a massive hit. I don't know how popular it is today, but it's certainly throughout a good few years after this was still popular. Everyone knows that the guitar riff is based on the Trogs' Wild Thing. There's also an element of Prince 1999 in the melody, although it's done in a kind of more punky way. Big hit, big kind of student indie disco song. And that's probably the best place to hear it, to be honest, in a disco, in indie disco after a few beers. Right, we follow that up with Mystify by In Excess. This is not one of the best tracks from the Kick album, but a solid kind of mid-paced pop rocker. And it was a big single in its own right. That is now followed up by one I'm going to play you. And very sadly, the lady in this band died. I think it was probably just late last year. This was their first ever single. I was never really a big fan at the time, but looking back at their legacy, they did have an awful lot of hit songs. And the funny thing about Roxette, I suppose, was that they were one of the few bands who kept this kind of late 80s sound going into the 90s. They kind of ever so slightly evolved, but really for the next 10 years they were having songs that sounded like this. They found the sound. Like Paula Abdul, incredibly heavy snares. Really, really heavy snares. It's kind of... You can't really call it rock, it's pure pop, but it's got kind of rocky guitars. But it's hella catchy. It's had 44 million views. 44 million, that's incredible. And yeah, R.I.P. Marie. So that's Roxette and The Look. That's followed up by Stevie Nicks, another legend of music, but sadly not one of her most notable songs. Pretty bland song without Fleetwood Mac. Bit sub Belinda Carlisle, really. That's followed by My Brave Face by Paul McCartney, which I actually really like. I'll stick it on. It was actually written by Elvis Costello, and every now and then Paul McCartney, throughout the 80s and even into the 90s, every now and then he'd come back with a song which just reminded everyone else that he really could do genius music, and especially when written by Elvis Costello. So quite who did what on this, the two of them, I can't tell you. But it's a good combination. I guess it's a kind of Scouse thing. Certainly Paul McCartney sings it quite passionately. We got loads of stuff at the Beatles at the beginning. Good old Paul. Everything he does, it's going to say he's a Beatle. Yeah, it's fairly simple. Linda's on keyboards, but it's not classed as Wings. It's a song about a guy who's putting up a brave face even though he's just going through a breakup. It's fairly adult in its theme, but it's got just a great series of melodies, almost individual melodies that all string together to form one full song. You can totally imagine Elvis Costello singing it, and I wonder what a version of him singing it would have sounded like. But it's good, actually. One of the best Paul McCartney songs on a Now album. Now, talking of Paul and talking of Liverpool, we've next up got a version of Ferry Cross the Mersey. It's credited here to Kerry Marsden, Paul McCartney and Holly Johnson. So we've already had Paul, we've already had Holly. Kerry Marsden, responsible for the original. This was released in the wake of the Hillsborough tragedy in April 1989. And an awful sporting tragedy that really hit the nation hard and totally transformed the way football stadiums operate. The song itself, it's an adequate cover. It's certainly what I'd say is fit for purpose. And of all the charity songs that we've had so far, I think this one's one that I really like best of all, because the three people involved, they're local to what happened. And it is a great song. It's a really good song anyway. And I love Liverpool. So any version of Ferry Cross the Mersey, particularly one that fundraises for such a good cause. It's a shame it ever had to be made. But yeah, I like it. And I think it's a good thing to do. Right, that was followed by, now, Song for Whoever, The Beautiful South. This was their first single. After the House Martins, Paul Heaton went off and formed this other band, Beautiful South, who would then go on throughout the 80s and 90s to have loads and loads of hits. And I've seen posters that they're still touring, or he's still touring, doing their old songs. I never really liked them. They always took the more kind of twee elements of the House Martins and the more sanctimonious side, and none of the kind of more kind of quirky side. That said, Song for Whoever is a great song. It's very cynical. It's basically a list of girls' names, and it's all about people who use them for money. And in that respect, it's a bit reminiscent lyrically of The Word Girl by Scritti Politti. It's a song about songs and about putting girls' names into songs and stuff. But it's good musically, actually, and it's quite catchy. So it's a bit kind of annoying, but it is good. This is followed by Days, a Kinks song done by the one and only Kirsty MacColl. I wouldn't say it's the most exciting song. It's a fairly run-of-the-mill cover, but it's a great song, and as always, she put us on a great performance. So fair play to her for that. Now we're going to play one now. I was a bit rude about their first song. Not that it was a bad song, but it was a very predictable song that you couldn't get away from on the radio. And it was just pumped into you to like it. That was Mary's Prayer by Danny Wilson. This, I much prefer. This is The Second Summer of Love. And this is strange. I really like this. I like this for a lot of reasons. Firstly, it's almost going back to Mungo Jerry or someone. It really could be 60s or 70s in its sound. This could have been a hit anytime from about 1960 onwards. But lyrically, it's incredibly topical. And they've drawn upon that parallels with the original 60s Summer of Love. Indeed, lots of people were calling 1989 the second Summer of Love. And there's a great lyric about acid on the radio, acid in the rain. So it's kind of social commentary. I like how it's about a genre of music, but it's not of that genre. Very much kind of commentary. But it's a great sing-along kind of campfire song as well. It's very quirky. Way better than Mary's Prayer. I really like this. Next up, Cry by Waterfront. I don't really know anything about them. It made about 30 in the charts. It was very suburb, living in a box. Really unmemorable. Now, Hue and Cry, funnily enough, they'd had a lot of unmemorable songs. This one, Violently, this was really good. This was their best song, possibly ever, certainly for a long time. And it was quite a ballad in a way, but it's a really, really nice song, actually, and it's got really good sort of chord sequence and stuff. So I really like that one, Hue and Cry, Violently. Best one they've done, probably. But then we follow that with Cliff, The Best of Me, and it's absolutely not. It's a really dull Cliff ballad, like a Christmas song with nothing to do with Christmas. And that ends record 1. Onwards to another classic song, which kicks off record 2. Now, I was saying about the Summer of Love, and there was really only one song that sums up the summer of 1989. You'd hear it from everywhere you went. You'd hear it out of car stereos. You'd hear it on little speakers in cafes. You'd hear it on big booming carnivals and fairgrounds. This was the sound of the summer of 1989. Lots of S's. And it's Soul to Soul. Back to Life. This was actually their second hit. Their first one, Keep On Moving. And kind of, well, this is another game changer, another paradigm shifter. Really is. This beat would go on to be used on a million, trillion different songs, called the Soul to Soul beat. And that beat was everywhere for a big part of the late 80s and early 90s. R&B, a totally different kind of soul. Totally different from the kind of soul that was on Now 5. It's, I guess you call it street soul, really. It's kind of picked up on hip-hop and stuff, and it's got a bit of a kind of dubby feel. The bass is whacked up, the beats are heavier, but it's still got your classic soul vocal. Karen Wheeler, of course, doing vocals. 56 million views. That's pretty much the population of Britain, isn't it? It's like almost everyone's heard it at least once. I bet you every one of you listening to this, watching this, knows Back to Life. Be very surprised if you've never heard it before. Great way to start side 2, or record 2. And we follow it up with another really good one, Man Child by Nena Cherry. Now this was a very different follow-up to, I'll put it on, a very different follow-up to Buffalo Stance, because whereas that was very kind of sassy and fun and kind of upbeat, this one's very kind of slow. Well, not very slow, but it's way slower. It's more melancholy. It's more eerie. And in some ways, it's almost like the very origins of trip hop. Yeah. This is the kind of beat that you'd still hear today, really. Immaculately produced. Different production values now. Really coming into the 90s. Predominantly sung vocal, some rap in there, and you get the feeling it's about overgrown children. Am I one? Good song, great song, very haunting, and not an obvious hit. Certainly not one where commercial success is the main concern. It's actually got substance and meaning. This is a good start. Now we follow this up with Bobby Brown. This is his first ever appearance. Well, no, actually his second appearance on a Now. His first was way back on Now 1 with Candy Girl. On Every Little Step, it's about his third solo hit, Now After My Prerogative. It's a very Bobby Brown by numbers song, but it's good. It's kind of modern, late 80s, kind of swing, soul, R&B. Not quite 90s yet, still 80s. Very influential on the stuff that would come into the into the kind of worlds of R&B, really. Now we got Inner City with their third and probably least good song so far. Do You Love What You Feel? It's still okay. I mean, Kevin Saunderson will never stop being a legend of techno, but there's nothing really on that you can't get better on Good Life or Big Fun. Right, we got D-Mob next and LRS, London Rhyme Syndicate. It is time to get funky. And this is almost saying the total opposite to what the previous song was saying. We call it acid. This song's pretty much saying it's over. It's time to let go. It is time to get funky. And it actually works really well because the music, when you strip off kind of acid house stuff, you're left with a fairly similar kind of groove. And it's more kind of hip-hop-y this time round. But yeah, it's great music. It's a great party track. Just not quite sure what would the real team D-Mob please stand up. Right, Joy and Pain next, Donna Allen. That's a reasonably well-known song. Pretty smooth R&B. I wouldn't say it's one of my favourite, but it's very classy, and there's really nothing to complain about with it. Another Bond film now, Licence to Kill, Gladys Knight, of all people. Maybe slightly not obvious choice for a Bond singer at that time, but she does an okay job of it. It's not one of the best. It's not one of the best movies. Not one of the best songs. But it was good to have her back on the charts. Natalie Cole follows that up with Miss You Like Crazy. Another big Natalie Cole ballad. She sure enough did a lot of them. And we follow that up with It's Alright by Pet Shop Boys. Farthest one under the same category as Style Council maybe and Promised Land. This is an old house song. Well, not that old, but a house song that had been doing a rounds. Turn Pop by Pet Shop Boys. I don't really like it, to be honest. I think the original's way better, and it does seem a bit contrived, almost like their heart's not really in it. I don't really know why they did it. It just seems a bit bandwagon-y, really, to be honest. Right, we've got another unique one now, 26. Let's play a bit, because I've not heard this since about 1989. You might never forgive me, but this song had so many haters you would not believe. Was it really that bad? Sorry, no. I feel awful to do this to you. Do you recognise that beat? Yep, Jive Bunny and the Mastermixers. Woo! These guys had three number ones, I think. Even though we never really got to see the people behind the rabbit costume. A cartoon rabbit, basically fronting mashups of old rock and roll songs. It's kind of wrong on every level, really, isn't it? But it's well done. Let's be honest, it is well done. To get these really unquantized songs, all different BPMs, and to stick it all together. When I couldn't stick them together, they'd just have the rabbit going on. Come on, everybody, everybody, everybody. They, needless to say, that the mega mixes or mashups, they got kind of more and more annoying as time went on. But I think this first one, when it came out, it was pretty unique. It's a single at the end of the day, and with these videos, I'm judging the music rather than the artist or the concept. Well, no, it's kind of the concept. I don't know. It's a party song, really. What can you say? I'm trying to be positive about it. Alright, anyway, I think we've had enough of that. We follow this one up with You On My Mind by Swing Out Sister. It's pretty good. Nowhere near as good as Breakout, but they were still around, still looking for the odd small hit. Cruel Summer 89, a totally pointless remix. I don't know why they needed to do that. The original Cruel Summer is totally timeless, and it really hadn't even dated by 1989. The 89 mix really just is dreadful, pointless. But that's followed, I'm pleased to say, with an all-time classic. Alright, I'm starting to see why people hate Jive Bunny now. Oh, God. God almighty. This follows now Sanity has returned. This is De La Soul's first appearance on a Now album. All-time timeless track. One of the greatest hip-hop tracks of all time, in my opinion. Brilliant use of the Hall & Oates break. A totally different kind of hip-hop as well. Totally going into the 90s now. Barely even 80s, really. But it is, because they're ahead of their time. Say No Go. Now this is followed by Norman Cook. As Norman Cook, featuring MC Wildski. His first post House Martins appearance. Interestingly, it's on the same now as the first Beautiful South appearance. So him and Paul Heaton were kind of keeping up with each other. But hey, he's gone in a way different way here. It's kind of based on Blame It on the Boogie. It's kind of hip house, if you remember that term. Should we stick a bit on? Because it is kind of historical in a way, but it's the first Norman Cook single. So it's a bit of pop history. Just sneaking into the end of the 80s here. But obviously will go on to be one of the hugest performers of the next 10, 20 years. How good is it? Well, it sounds like Planet Rock beat there. Or is it Kraftwerk or someone? There's all sorts in there. It's very Norman Cook. And in terms of paradigms, this is really now the origins of things like Big Beat. So pretty ahead of its time. We follow this by Double Trouble and the Rebel MC. Probably best known for the song that followed this. But this is a pretty strong opening track. Rebel MC went on to do all sorts of more underground stuff. He's one of those people who had his real pop stuff early on in his career and then went way underground. And Just Keep Rocking's a pretty good tune. It's got a kind of scarry backing, kind of very London. Let's play a bit. Some of the first London MCing on there on one of these. So maybe doesn't really get a lot of the kind of their fame or the acclaim. That's the word I was trying to think of that he deserves. Yeah, so it's Scar in there. Well, this is very ahead of its time in terms of how he's rapping is. Wow, this song's way better than Street Tough. Even though Street Tough's kind of similar, it feels like it's more of a copy of this. I don't really want to hate on Street Tough. I don't even want to talk about it because it's not even on this now. That'll be next. So we'll keep it with this one. Just Keep Rocking. I'm still rocking all these years later. And we follow this one up with another one that's radically different. Why they stuck this one here, Lullaby by The Cure. Because I can't think there's many Rebel MC fans and Cure fans, although I guess I am, of both. Now, Lullaby was a good comeback song for The Cure. And this was their attempt to kind of keep up with the change of the decade. And they did it really, really well with this. Wow, 45 million views. That says it all. People still listening to this today. Timeless sound. Anytime from the 80s, 90s up to the present day. As with always, the videos are really striking. The whole aesthetics of it are brilliant. It's just Robert Smith mumbling away. Over this sort of groovy backing, and it was really good to have The Cure back. So that's now 15 then, and it's a pretty strong selection actually. It's better than I remember it. There's not a lot of bad things on it. It's a good mix of kind of rock and indie with dance. There's much less old school 80s pop on here now. We're almost at the 90s really. You've still got a few hangovers from the old days, but in terms of the real classics on this one, well, talking of hangovers, Queen, I Want It All, a last real hurrah for them. I would say Mystify, Classic in Excess, The Look, Rock Set, I think it's a really big pop track. What else? I'm looking for real classics. Back to Life, absolutely. Soul to Soul, definitely. To a certain extent, Manchild, Nana Cherry, sonically, definitely. I think within the world of soul and R&B, Joanne Payne, Donna Allen. Say No Go, De La Soul, and this. So yeah, quite a few good timeless songs on this one. And it's one more album before we get to the 90s. So thank you very much indeed, and let me know your feedback.